Inside the Birds is back. What's going on, everybody? Geoff Mosher, Adam Caplan, and well, Adam and I are sorry to say that by the time people have listened to this podcast, we will be back in the Delaware Valley from the Senior Bowl, and we're just not going to spend a lot of time, Adam, rubbing it into our listeners back home in the Jersey, Philly, Delaware, Northeast area, how beautiful the freaking weather was in Mobile, Alabama this week. I mean, it was pretty nice, right?
My man, see, I don't know if they could tell because this, the color gets filtered, but
Right.
I have such sunburn. And our friend Jack Borowski, who's a draft analyst who works at Pro Football Network, he got it so bad on his neck because we don't know. Like, I mean, I usually start looking at weather when I travel 5 days in advance, and the weather.com app is phenomenal. The accuracy is incredible. But you don't know how strong the sun's going to be. And I learned my lesson. If you travel and the sun's going to be super strong, if it says it's going to be sunny all day, you might just want to spend $5 to $10 on sunscreen. I should have done that. I wish I would have. Anyway,
Yeah,
tough.
I tend to not bring sunscreen. I made it out okay, but I do. Jack and some other people are like, "Wow, you're a lot more red than you were the day before."
It's
Even
Jack.
Clay was like, "Man, I got a little sun." Clay Harbor was down here, got a little
Yeah.
sunburn. So crazy stuff. It was a good week. We're gonna put a bow on the 2023 season for the Eagles in this podcast. Basically, we were here, as we mentioned in the last podcast. You get a chance when you come down to a place like this, or when you go to the combine or other NFL events, is to catch up with people that that you respect, that are well in the know for what we're looking for, that you sometimes you can't get them during the season, during the madness of all this. So I think you and I have a better idea of some of the underlying issues now that led to what happened, them going 1-6, the slide. So we'll put a bow on that. We'll talk a little bit about, a lot about the Senior Bowl. We were here to watch the practices and talk to people who watch the practices and got some good feedback on that. And then pretty soon we're going to shift into it's going to be free agency. We're going to have to really start to get into that mode and talk about who's coming, who's going, and things like that.
Yeah.
It kind of it comes and goes so quickly, don't you think?
Plus, right now this year they're out of the playoffs earlier, but we were talking about this in our live stream with our Patreon members that man, they've got more free agents than I anticipated. But added into that, what you're talking about is they have some tough decisions on contracts. They've got some guys with roster bonuses due. The James Bradbury decision. I know people probably say it's easy; they got to cut him, but it's just under 11 million, fully guaranteed. He's
Right.
probably a good fit for the Fangio system, the true Fangio system. But can he play anymore? I mean, that's a tough one, man. And they've got some extensions to look at, obviously, with some guys who now could be extended. Some of their guys who were taken in the 21 draft, like Devontae Smith and Landon Dickerson. So lots coming up here in the future with the contracts with the Eagles.
Yeah, there'll be plenty of. Somebody asked me down here in Mobile, Adam, who knows what we do, and said, what do you guys do in the off season? And I said, we work harder, right? I mean, like there's just so I'm like the off season is way more calling, way more work, way more sourcing. You got the draft, the free agency, Senior Bowl, combine. I'm like, there is no off season. I said, I don't know. I'll let you know in like late June when Adam and I start doing like a stories podcast.
Well, and also the coach, all the coaching changes on the offensive defense, and we'll get into something that actually changed on Thursday, which is interesting from a guy that I know very well, Matt Zenith. We'll talk about his scoop, which
Hmm.
is interesting. But yeah, look, lots going on, and part of being here, whether it's a Combine or Senior Bowl, sometimes at the Super Bowl, which you and I were at last year together because the Eagles were in it, is you never know who you're going to run into. It could be a GM from another team, could be someone in scouting from another team to get ideas. We were with some scouts, I think Wednesday night you and I were together, and we saw a bunch of scouts at one of the bars who know a lot of people with the Eagles, so they have their opinions of what happened.
Hmm.
I would say, well, let me ask you this question. From
Hmm.
you, we weren't together all the time, and we were together part of the time, but when you were talking to people, did the biggest thing come up? And they asked us this, and they gave their opinion. But would you say that the slide and people asking what the hell happened, that was the thing that I got a lot of.
Yes. So that's a great question. And I'll answer that in a second. First, I want to remind everyone Inside the Birds is presented by our friends at Ocean Casino Resort in Atlantic City. It's the exclusive Jersey Shore resort of Inside the Birds. I think that the fascinating thing about being down here this week, and it sounds like you experienced it too, is we're out there looking for better information on what happened, and yet how many people who are not connected to the Eagles that we just know would walk up to us and be like, "Dude, what the hell happened?" It's just so rare that you see a team. I know we talked about the Steelers from a couple of years ago that started off 10-1, and then they lost like four out of their last five and lost the playoffs. But if you go look at those games that they lost, I don't think they were embarrassing losses. They weren't humiliating. It wasn't like even the team just completely changed the way the Eagles did. I mean, the Eagles went from 10-1 to losing games they should have won to just by the end of it, they were getting their asses kicked. And it was,
Yeah.
I don't think people in the league have seen such a phenomenon like that before, where it's like a Jekyll and Hyde situation, a team that just figured out ways to win to a team that just wanted to give you the win. Like the team that says, you just got off the bus here, take the win.
Yeah, it was more like the Eagles had 2 seasons in a season.
Yeah.
That was the thing, and the slide of losing 6 out of 7. Because you're talking to agents, like we're going to get into that today. We'll give you some feedback we got. Some just offered it because man, my guy didn't like this or like that. It would give you context to what happened because we didn't play the game, so you can only go by what people think who would know, or who have players on the roster, whatever the case may be. And it's one of the biggest of my lifetime. I wasn't alive when the Phillies had their slide in '64,
Mm.
but just looking at all the teams in Philadelphia, it's hard to find something like this. I know people, real diehard Eagle fans might remember before Dick Vermeil um, resigned, to retire for 15 years.
Yeah.
Just the way that went down and how he had a slide. But man, this is it. And then the bad taste in their mouth of Tampa Bay, which is ironically the worst game of the season, the playoff game. That's what, on your point, this is what leaves people baffled. They don't understand how they get at 10-1. We could all argue that they probably were fraudulent 10-1 because just the way
Hmm.
they had to win to come back in games. Okay. Which shows character though. But the lack of character of this football team to finish the way they did was just stunning.
It really was. It was. So we'll get into that, right? We'll put a bow on it and then we'll get into the Senior Bowl standouts. I know a lot of people, we had our Ask ITB live stream on Patreon on Wednesday night, and people were already, who's looking good? What kind of prospect? Everybody wants to get into that part of the offseason, but we're not there yet. But we do have really good intel on some standouts here from the Senior Bowl. And I have to mention this just because it's really funny. You and I both were confused for different people down here in Mobile. You were with me on one of them where an agent approached me uh, from the behind and kept yelling, "Hey, Sark, coach!"
Oh,
And I turned around and the agent says to me, "Oh, my fault. I thought you were Steve Sarkisian. You were next to me, right, when that happened, or was
no, but
somebody
you
else
told me
next to me?
about it. But
I forget who was with me. Yeah.
I saw Jed Fish. I saw
Uh-huh.
him. Where's he? He left Arizona. Where's he now?
Oh, that's a great. He was at Michigan, right? Then he was at Arizona. I forgot where he was. Where he is now. I can look it up real quick. But I will tell you, it's the first time I've been confused
Washington,
for.
UW. Yeah, UW.
Yes,
Okay,
Washington,
yeah.
right. I've been confused for some people before, but Steve Sarkisian
That was
definitely a
fun.
first for me. Yeah, yeah.
What I said was the nose from a side, Sark is taller than you. Hey, wish you could get his money. Anyway,
That's what
uh,
I said. I literally said, "Hey, I wouldn't
exactly.
be mind, being
Check.
mistaken for his paycheck."
But what I did miss this year, and he just retired. Nick Saban for many years would go to. Those of you who've been here before, you have seen it where he'd fly in, he'd come in a
Oh,
helicopter, and they drop it.
yes,
It's pretty cool, you know that. And
yeah,
remember
with
when
the
Tebow
crimson
came in?
blazer on and the
Exactly.
alligator boots. Yeah,
Remember with the when Tebow came in here, it was absolute insanity.
yes, that was crazy.
Yeah,
Just when he would come, and I remember seeing him come here back when they practiced at the high school. One team practiced at the high school field, the other
Fair
at
Hope.
Lad Peoples, and
Yeah,
he came to the high school field, and again, crimson blazer, alligator boots, and the way the fans were, it was like they had just seen God. You couldn't believe it's like a rock star
Saban. Yeah,
status. Yeah, Nick Saban. So yeah, it's quite a scene down here. So I told you this. I was having breakfast with you one morning at the hotel and someone saw us and then came out to me and said, "Hey, do you work with Sal?" So you got confused with Sal Palantonio. So Steve
years ago.
Sarkisian, Sal Palantonio, all same thing, right?
There
We're
you
all the
go.
same.
That's
All
how
right.
anyway,
All right. Before we get into our intel on the season, let's pause and hear a word from our friends at Ocean Casino Resort in Atlantic City.
Go to get your game on. Go for the beers. Go for the cheers. Go for the hit and the hits. Go for the stakes and the stakes. Go to get your parlay on. Go to get your party on. Go for the scene. Go for the screens. Go for the gallery. Go for the win. Go to Ocean. Visit theoceanac.com to plan your visit.
Okay. Putting a bow on the end of the season, Adam. I think, we talked a lot about everything that went wrong on defense, from the confusion, right, to then stripping the play caller, Sean Desai, of his duties, then going to Matt Patricia, that not being worse. And I think we nailed things during the year on how this is dysfunctional, it's not normal, and could it really just all be on one guy? And if so, why would you even have the guy in the building at that point? And a lot of the information we've gotten this week is there was more of a disconnect than I even realized between the defensive players and Sean Desai. And I think I remember having a conversation with you, and you summed it up really well, and you can probably do it again in this, is there's a difference between being smart, well-educated, and considered a really good schemer, which Sean Desai was when he got to the Eagles. That's what people would tell us about him, right? And then also being a great leader, connecting with your players, understanding what their needs are versus your needs are, making it work when times are tough. And that is the area that I didn't realize was impacted the most. I didn't realize until talking to some, people down here, agents who represent some players, on just how big the gap was between where the Eagles were on defense and where Sean Desai was, and not being those two not factions not being able to meet in the middle and have an understanding of each other. So I understand better now, Adam, why the organization felt the need to say this man needs to take a step back, because our players, we reported that the players during the season, that players were not happy with certain things, but now I realize just how unhappy they were and how maybe unbending Desai was toward that, and why a move needed to be made. But I think it does invite the question that you and I asked time and time again: if this guy needs to not be calling the plays, or if there's a gap between him, then why are you keeping him? Why do you keep him around? It doesn't make sense.
Well, the latter I understood only because they were going to keep the same scheme, and that was not Patricia's scheme. And
True.
as we explained, I don't know how many times, you don't, when you in season, you don't change the scheme. You can't do that. It's like someone with the Steelers told us that when Matt Canada was canned, Mike Sullivan, the quarterback's coach, would call the plays, and the guy was promoted to coordinator. I can't remember the guy's name now, but anyway, they just took the same playbook and they eliminated the plays that didn't work for Kenny Pickett. They gave him his best plays, and that was it. That's what you do.
Mm-hmm.
But Patricia, not resolving Desai at all, I'm just explaining what wound up happening in the end. Patricia said, in a way, screw that. I'm just going to run what I run and keep some of the stuff. You can't do that. You figure out what worked earlier in the season when they were playing better and use those plays. Go through their blitz packages. What worked? But he didn't want to do that. It was an absolute train wreck. But to move this along here, and why we really think Desai was reassigned, and you were talking about this, and nothing to do with him being smart or not. Like they knew, they did their homework on him in Chicago. There were no bad issues at all. But here in Philly, because it was only 1 year, so you can only base it on that. His inability to connect with these veteran players, we were told is mostly veterans based on the agents we talked to this week, probably 4 or 5 of them.
Mm-hmm.
They just could not connect. Would you say they tune him out? Is that fair?
In fact, well, I'll tell you this: one agent who represents one of the veterans on the team said that the player stopped talking. Like, he just could not talk to Sean Desai. That's how big the gap between them had got. He just don't want nothing to do with it. So that just shows you can listen. I get coaches believe in their way and they double down in their process, but the best coach I've ever been around also know that you need a level of buy-in from your veterans. Rookies you can get away with because rookies want to come and run through the wall and prove themselves for you, especially if they're day 2 or day 3 guys. And the Eagles played plenty of those guys. So that's why I think we heard it most from veterans. Veterans have already set the standard there. Standard is the standard. And then when they have somebody new come in and that person is unbending and says, you're going to run my scheme, whether you like this or not. And I'm not saying he said it that way, but that was sort of the vibe that I got. It was like my way. We're doing it this way. And your concerns are not really going to impact how we're going to do things. If you can't get the veterans on this team, especially guys who've been there for a while, to buy in and appreciate what you're doing, then you're going to lose the team because the veterans are the ones who set the message down to everybody else and the younger players. So that became really problematic.
So Nick has got Doug Peterson had the same thing, the players committee, and that's kind of where I think this came about. Because Nick was talking to these guys, and one of the things he does well when he's really doing it well is connecting well with his players, and he's in tune with what's going on. And clearly this became a problem. And hope Desai learns from, I hope they gave him good feedback. I hope Nick and Howie, when they talked about what was going to happen with him in midseason, I hope they got with him and said, hey, here's what's going on in case you didn't know it. Unfortunately, it's just not going to work well. Because to be fair to him, like you said, they could have just fired him because it wasn't going to work. But I hope that they gave him some decent feedback, so as he continues his coaching journey, he could learn from the situation, not let it happen again. But to move on here,
yeah.
So that certainly happened. And the other thing we got from agents were that the culture within the coaching staff, whether teaching, whether players didn't think they were getting better, whether lack of focus, whether they were not buying in. I would say the agents that we spoke to, the one thing they would agree with, that was part of their slide. Like they asked our opinion, we gave them our opinion, and they had these agents had their own opinion of what their players thought is that there's a lack of connection and buy-in doing that. Because that would make sense. How the hell do you have a slide like that out? I don't want to say it was out of the blue. You could see the team fading when they were 10-1 in terms of defense was collapsing. They had to come back. The offense was inconsistent. But to have that type of slides, it just doesn't happen.
Right.
And I know it's subjective. You could take 5 or 6 reasons, which people could tell you. There's no way to quantify it by numbers. Well, here's why they folded. Well, yeah, there's a reason why the numbers might show something, but there's a reason why those numbers were what they were, because there was lack of buy-in, focus, technique, the tackling. We're going to get more into this in future shows about sort of our all-season plan. One thing that came up this week, I know I didn't talk to you about this because I got it last night, is that one coach who has very strong connections to the Eagles assistants says that he knows from talking to their assistants, because they have such late practices, and we know it's worked well for the Eagles, but should they wear pads more? Should they tackle in training camp? There's got to be something they can do. It can't just be because the coaching wasn't good enough that they decided that they weren't going to tackle very well in the second half of the season. I mean, come on.
Right. And on that, Adam, you'll talk to players, and there are guys down here who've played also, they're who might be in personnel or coaching, and they'll tell you that when the culture's not good or when the message from the top isn't reaching, it's not that guys go out there and don't play hard intentionally, but it's that when you don't believe and you don't feel that intensity, you're just sort of subconsciously don't always give it your effort and you don't realize it. So I don't want people to think that we're saying like, the Eagles went out there and just didn't care because they were mad at their coaches. No, because I think it was John DiFilippo and Jason Vaughn who both pointed out to us on different platforms from Inside the Birds that when they were watching the tape, and Quentin Michael said it too, that they could see that the team, they weren't firing off the ball or coming out of the huddle with their normal energy. And I'm sure if you ask individually all the players on the Eagles about that, they'd say, no, I'm trying out there. I'm really giving it a while, but it becomes a bigger thing. It becomes sort of your overall team malaise because you're not inspired by your leadership. You almost fall victim to the malaise. So we're not trying to say that guys were out there protesting their coaches and not playing hard, whether it's, we saw Jordan Davis kind of fall off at the end. We'll get into that, and Jalen Carter. It's just, it became a part of the overall culture and lack of leadership issue. And body language. Body language was a big thing. That I know that came up with you in some of the conversations that you had, and even with the head coach and the quarterback, that was an issue.
Yeah, and that's and our friend Carl Stevenson talked about this in our live stream. I agree with this. I thought this was really smart. It was in the back of my mind that when Sirianni said what he said in the press conference about what is, because we know he's been a CEO head coach, but because he's not going to be as involved because it's not his scheme anymore. They'll certainly have input. This could free him up to do other things. Well, part of it, Nick has got to do a better job of getting the culture back. just because you connect well with your players doesn't mean everything's right.
Right.
And this is something I know it's hard to quantify, but his offseason, part of it is whether it's calling your players, or I know that they're not allowed to talk about football when they're building until OTA start, the rules which changed in the 11 CBA. But his leadership, the older guys, whether it's Lane, BG, whoever's coming back of the older guys, he's got to get their feedback and he's got to listen, and he needs to make some adjustments too. Nick, more and more we talk about this, more and more I don't believe he had a very good season. I know the record was what it was, but again, you don't fall off like this just by chance. Six out of 7 and look like total garbage against the Bucks, where you're not competitive. Where you should be competitive, it's the playoffs. So that's on coaching. That goes to the top. Nick's got to take a lot of responsibility for that.
Yeah, don't you think that Nick and Jalen have to work on how their messaging is received going into 2024? Jalen is known as being stoic. A lot of people will point
Yeah.
out he's stoic, and it's great when your quarterback. So here's the sort of gift and the curse. You want your quarterback to not get too high when things are good and not get too low when things are bad, and he's good at that. But when things aren't good, or when you have a teammate that's struggling, you need your quarterback, you're the face of your team, to be able to uplift you and be that motivational guy. And there were clearly times, and you can see it just watching games, where if things aren't going well, he's on the, and I'm not saying he's moping. He's not moping, but he's not looking like he's trying to get the troops rallied. He's more like, you know, I feel like because his story is one of, I came from, I was benched and I had to go somewhere else, and then I was a second round pick. Nobody believed in me, and here I am now. He wants everybody to have that chip on his shoulder, but not everybody's dialed and wired the same way. And I think he's got to be more uplifting in those moments and say, no, it's not just on that guy to pull himself. You need to help uplift him too.
Right. So you see on the sidelines, or excuse me, on the bench, he's staring, right?
Mm-hmm.
And people didn't say much about it until he was struggling a little bit. And his numbers were down and the offense was down, and people started bringing this up like it's a legitimate thing. And I don't doubt it yeah, sometimes you need to get up and get on your guys. Let's go, whatever you want to say to get in their face, whatever you feel you need to do. But that's something that he needs to work on. And I know that he's not as outgoing as maybe they want him to be, but that's something as he matures as a quarterback,
Mm-hmm.
that he's going to have to be. He just has to. They need it, man. I mean, he's now a vested veteran. Got his contract extended. He's got to do that, and I think Nick's got to work on that with him. It is connecting, as he talks about. He brags about that, about his ability to connect. Well, you know what? This is part of your job as a head coach. Not only connect, but get your players to be better leaders. And I know some of the agents actually brought that up to us. It wasn't just Hurts. It was some of the veterans that maybe could be better with the younger players, and whatever the case may be. In season, there's just no way to know this stuff. There's
Right.
just no. I mean, this is just the beauty of traveling. Like,
Yeah.
wow, this is the most work you and I have done since we've done the show on this stuff. Isn't it amazing? You have a
Yeah.
season like this, that this is what agents want to talk about.
Yep. Yep. I feel like once every 3 or 4 years, the Eagles go through some kind of strange transition where when we're on the road trying to get answers, people are also coming up to us trying to get answers. Like what in the world
Because
just happened there? It's like only the Eagles can do this.
well, no one has it, but not everyone is giving their theories, right? The
Right.
connectivity, leadership. Okay, can't
Mm-hmm.
quantify that, but it can on the lack of focus. That's one other thing. The lack of energy in and out of the huddle. You're not supposed to walk. You're supposed to jog to the line, jog back. That
Right.
stuff matters because it tells you there's a lackadaisical nature that Nick has got to take a look at. And the other thing is one more thing. This is brought up to us as well. We've brought this up before, but when agents who have players on the Eagles bring it up, I thought that was fascinating. That a couple guys said that the youth of or the lack of experience, and I think they were talking about some of the college coaches, guys who were
Mm-hmm.
at staff. No one in particular. We didn't get any names. They just brought up, hey man, this staff last year's got not enough experience at some positions from NFL standpoint. And look, there are going to be a lot of changes. There have been, and we'll get into one nugget here in a second. But yeah, that was it. And then I know we got some interesting feedback on Fangio. It wasn't always all positive, which I thought was fascinating.
Yeah, so that's a good segue. I want to transition into talking about the new staff, the quote unquote adults in the room, as you're mentioning. So we'll do that in a second. First, I've got to remind everybody that whether your resolution is to save money, eat better, or stress less, HelloFresh is here to help you do all three. So say hello to your most delicious year yet with fresh ingredients and chef-crafted recipes at a price you're going to love, and it's delivered right to your door. So you have all resolved that you're actually going to sit down and eat dinner around the table. But what do you do about those nights when your schedule is jam packed? That's like every night for me. All right. That's when we turn to HelloFresh's lineup of quick and easy meals, including their 15-minute recipes that are designed to help you minimize mealtime stress. Now, that sounds nice to me. I need to minimize my meal stress. Every time I make a HelloFresh meal, whether we're doing a quick and easy meal or one of their other varieties, we're blown away by the freshness, taste, and overall quality. In fact, we've tried so many great options that I just can't name one that is my favorite. There's great chicken meals, shrimp, pasta, vegetarian meals. I mean, they just offer everything for a great variety. You can eat it every single day of the week, Adam, and not have the same thing more than once. You got to love variety like that. And now there's a new deal with HelloFresh. If you go to HelloFresh.com/Eagles free, use the code Eagles free, one word, EAGLESFREE, all lowercase. You get free breakfast for life. That is one breakfast item per box while the subscription is active. So free breakfast for life at HelloFresh.com/Eagles free, and use that code Eagles free, EAGLESFREE. Act now for America's #1 meal kit. All right, getting back to the defense. So, and I just want to leave, the last thing I wanted to point this out, I forgot, because somebody who worked with Sean Desai at a previous spot, I bumped into when we were talking, and he said, he couldn't exactly see it coming, the disconnect between the Sean and the players, but he could kind of understand it being in the position that he was in the market that he was in, and things going south. But he point out to me that the surprising thing is that Sean has a master's degree in education. And so you would think one of the strengths there would be relating, understanding how to kind of, connect with people, because, education, like teaching and sort of that profession, although not every teacher does a great job of connecting with their students. But I wonder as he goes forward, because I'm sure Sean will get another job again. I don't know if it'll be DC, but I wonder how he'll look in the mirror at the experience. Will he say this was a bad environment, or will he say need to adjust and change a little bit? I think that'll be interesting to see how he goes forward and what happens with him.
Yeah, that's what I was saying earlier, where I
Mhm.
hope they gave Howie and Nick gave him good feedback. Here's what happened, and I have no idea what his relationship was with some of the veterans. At least on his way out, we saying goodbye. Did he ask? Who knows? Who knows?
Right.
But guys coached DBs before, and again, we talked to people working with the Bears. We got generally positive feedback. I talked to someone with the Seahawks
Mm-hmm.
time, how smart he was. But again, smart does not make you a great coach. Your ability to
100%.
connect, get buy-in is super huge. That is a major issue. Nick Sirianni had that when he came here in 21. In fact, I know someone who I ran into over the last year said to me that staff did an unbelievable job in 21 because the roster wasn't very good and they probably overachieved.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a coaching thing. So we'll see what happens.
So to that point, I was expecting to come down here this week with you and run into a lot of, agents or people who've worked alongside Vic Fangio or know Vic Fangio, or like I said, agents who had players play for him, and hear nice job, Eagles. Like, yeah, you got the guy. You don't get the Fangio template. You get Vic Fangio. That is an excellent hire. And there are some people who think it's going to be a very good hire, but there's also a decent number of people who sort of give the side eye, like, we'll see. Or, Vic. And I was surprised by that. Were you a little surprised by some of the
Yes.
mixed reaction for a guy who has that reputation, right?
Well, okay, so it was tail end of Wednesday's practice, and this guy worked with Vic. He didn't dislike him, but did he talk? Was it is Vic's not stubbornness, but just his demeanor? Did the guy? I caught the tail end of your conversation with this guy. Did he? But his facial expressions. This guy you spoke with,
Yeah.
was like, wow. I was like, what? What did he? I didn't quite hear all of it. What was? Was it he didn't think he was? What was the issue?
It wasn't even that he went into great detail. I think he was intentionally being vague, but he
Okay.
was making the right type of facial expressions to let me know what he really thought of Vic Fangio. And then it's just one person, but it doesn't matter because we heard it from other people too, where it just doesn't feel like I, the slam dunk. Obviously, no one said this guy's not a smart guy, not a brilliant defensive mind. It's just, again, we talk about leadership or the ability to relate to the players. I know some people said in Miami it just was not a good mix between the culture that they have there and him. And who knows? It's not like Miami's defense was bad by any stretch of the means, but when the injuries settled in, it almost became hard to judge at that point. But you heard Drew Rosenhaus come and say, I mean, he's got players playing there for Vic, and you heard him say that, a lot of them weren't sad to see him go. So I don't know. I mean, I guess I'm waiting to see how this thing pans out. But at first, when the hire was made, I'm like, this makes so much sense. This is the defense they want to run. They finally get the guy that they wanted to run it all season long, and he's a brilliant defensive mind. This thing's going to be great as long as Howie Roseman gets him the players that he needs. It's going to be a really good thing. And now I'll say I'm just going to reserve judgment and see how it plays out. I'm just
Well,
surprised. The only thing that surprised me was the lukewarm reaction that I got down here, thinking that universally we were going to hear, "Oh, this is a great move for the Eagles."
there was one other person who was sort of negative, but this is a coach from another
Yes.
team who didn't work with Vic, but he just I think what happens also, there's competitive jealousy sometimes with coaches. They think a guy's overrated or it's too much hype on a guy. We've gotten that over the years, but I thought it was just interesting. I was catching the tail end of this conversation you were having. I was like, oh, I wonder what this guy's problem with Fangio was. Did he have a
Yeah.
run with him? I don't know, but you would know better. So, but that was it. It's just that we have a little bit better clarity because it's impossible to get it in season. Like, okay, we knew that in season that there were issues with some of the players in terms of buy-in, but it was much deeper than that.
Mm-hmm.
And when the veterans don't think they're getting better, like you hear this from, this from talking to players. It doesn't have to be a guy in the league 10 years, but when they don't think they're getting better, that's also an issue, which we've talked about before over the years. It doesn't have to be defense; it could be any position. And they'll sometimes go to the head coach and say, "Hey, man, this guy isn't getting. I don't like the way he coaches me." And it's tough sometimes, particularly if they didn't see when they reassigned Desai. We have no idea what they told Desai, why he was being reassigned.
Mm-hmm.
But it is what it is.
Yeah. So on the flip side, though, when we were asking about the new assistants, Clint Hurt and Carl Scott, we got really good feedback as far as people thought that was exciting. But unfortunately for the Eagles, it appears that one of these guys is not coming, according to a report that recently came out from, I want to say, at 24/7 Sports. Does I have that correctly?
Right. Yeah.
Yeah,
In
Matt
fact,
Zenitz.
yeah, Matt Zenith, actually, I know Matt from when he covered the Ravens.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe I'm not going to guess who his sources, but he knows he coached he's coach. He wrote about the Ravens as a reporter covering for the Baltimore Sun, I believe. Then he covered Alabama and Saban for many years, and now he's writing for 247 Sports. So he put a report out on Thursday that said that the Seahawks are expected to retain Carl Scott as a senior defensive assistant as part of the new staff with Mike McDonald. Now, he was their DBs coach. Now, I don't know. Again, titles, you have to know exactly what they're doing. That I don't know if that means he's still going to be their DBs coach or he got a different role there. Who knows? We don't know why he's not coming to Philly, but we do know this. Based on this report, he's not coming to Philly after agreeing to a deal. Didn't sign a contract.
Mm-hmm.
So, okay, Eagles need a DBs coach. So we'll have to take a look at who that is going to be, but it will not be Carl Scott.
Right. Now, as I think we told people this in the last podcast, but I'll remind them that while we were in Mobile, Howie Roseman was not here, Nick Sirianni was not here, Vic Fangio was not here. And as we understood it, some of the people we just met, the coaches and people were back in Philadelphia, and they're talking to current staff members as far as, are you going to stay on with my staff? Let's see. I got to get to know you because, that's what new coordinators do. They kind of look in-house and they talk to people. And sometimes coordinators have their autonomy to bring in their own people. So right now, both on offense and defense, I think there's a state of flux right now, where it's fluid situation with some of the position coaches. So without Carl Scott coming here, we're gonna have to see what the fates of the entire. Remember, the Eagles secondary has 3 different coaches, right? They have DK McDonald, who was the defensive backs coach, who clearly they were looking to replace because they were going to have Carl Scott. And then they have the nickel backs coach, Ronell Williams, right? And then the assistant D-backs coach was Tarver. What's the last name?
No, Taver Johnson.
Taver Johnson, right? So, and then there's still other position coaches who, right now, you would say it's fluid. We don't know if they're definitely coming back or not.
Yeah, and the other thing for Vic Fangio is, does he want a smaller staff? Does he need all these assistant to the assistant? You know what I'm talking
Yeah.
about? You need 3 DBs coaches. So I know in recent years teams have started to split it up because for specialty reasons, maybe one guy's better at handling nickels than safeties and corners together. So we'll have to see what happens. But in offense, there are going to be some changes as well. We'll see what Kellen Moore does here, because for what we understand, he's got autonomy in terms of the scheme. He's going to run his scheme. He's calling the plays. They want to streamline how many people are in, as we understand, how many people are in Hurts's ear. There were probably too many last season. So we'll see what happens there. And maybe look, we heard this with Wentz. I forget what year it was when it was probably 2020 when they had Rich Scangarello, Press Taylor, obviously Doug Peterson.
Andrew Briner and Marty Morningweg were the
There
other
you go.
two.
Yeah, it's just too many. Way too many.
Yes. A lot of chefs, as you just mentioned. All right, so we'll see. But we did get, and I know we talked about it last podcast, but Clint Hurt is going to, people expect him to have a very good impact, especially on the young kids, on Jordan Davis, on Jalen Carter. Now, Jordan's got to get himself, conditioned, in shape. He's got to be ready to go. But it sounds like Clint Hurt is going to be the type of guy to hold him accountable and be on him and Jalen Carter to make sure you're playing hard every snap, to make sure you're ready to play every day. I mean, the guy is gigantic. If he was coming and talk to me, and I know that Jalen and Jordan are big guys too, but I wouldn't want to make this guy mad. I'm just saying.
Yeah, we ran into an agent who knows him and said that he did play at University of Florida. He had a knee injury.
Miami, right? Wasn't it Miami?
Correct. He also coached there. Yeah, I think that was
Right.
his first assistant job. And look, we mentioned this last show. The defense is clearly not good enough with him as the defensive coordinator, but there were issues obviously with the personnel as well in terms of being good enough. They lost Nwosu to Uchenna Nwosu to a significant injury. That was big for them because he'd been a great story. Witherspoon was in and out of lineup. He was terrific as a rookie, but okay, it didn't work well enough. There were going to be some, as I understood it, there were going to be some changes with Pete Carroll in terms of who's going to be doing what if he come back. Doesn't matter now because he's not. Mike McDonald runs a different defense. He doesn't know. He doesn't have a relationship with Clint Hurt. He may want to have with Carl Scott, which is maybe why he's staying. So, but the Eagles are glad to have him because he's one of these guys. You kind of know it when you talk to coaches, who they really think are great coaches. This guy. Hurt's name comes up a lot, and as you said, he's a big dude. And looking forward. When I would go to Seahawks camp, I usually, if I hear about a coach, I'll want to watch him. But I didn't. I know who he was. You couldn't miss him. They've had good production, over the years. But it's going to be interesting to see what this looks like going forward.
Yeah, definitely. All right, ready to talk about some Senior Bowl standouts
Yes.
in a second. First, we're going to tell you, we know that losing stinks. We know that watching the Super Bowl soon without your favorite team in it stinks. But what also stinks, trying to find good tickets online. That's why you need Game Time. It's the fast, easy way to buy tickets for sporting events, concerts, shows near you. Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying tickets. And right now, on the Game Time app, you are just 2 taps away from tickets to seeing any of your local pro or college sports teams. You can see comedy acts, you can see concerts, anything you want to see. The best part is that Game Time offers event cancellation protection and job loss protection. Game Time's the only ticketing app that gives you the complete peace of mind with your purchase. They got the all-in prices that show you the total up front. And of course, they've got that function that allows you to see the view from your seat, which everybody loves. So you know exactly what you're getting and what to expect at checkout. Game Time's also obsessed with helping you save money. They have the zone deals that let you pick the section while Game Time picks the seats for the best savings. And then there's the Game Time guarantee. If you find tickets in the same section in a row for less money, Game Time credits you 110% of the difference. So download the Game Time app, create an account, use code BIRDS for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and use the redeem code BIRDS, BIRDS, for $20 off your first purchase. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest prices, guaranteed. All right. Before we talk about the Senior Bowl standouts, Adam, I think it's important to lay out the ground rules of what is permissible and not permissible during these practices. Okay. So I'll throw it to you. You tell our listeners and viewers what teams are allowed to do and not to do at these practices.
All right, so they're 2-hour practices every day. They're a little bit longer than they were when I first started coming, and you cannot tackle. It's basically like a training camp practice. They have without the thud. You know, you're not really like when a running back goes to the line here, they just make a move and get upfield. They're not even getting hit. Whereas in training camp, you notice they'll use an elbow, a shoulder, or they push the guy. They're not really doing that here much. So the thing here, talking to Jim Nagy, the director of the Senior Bowl here, and some coaches and some scouts, you really want to see the players catch the football, because that's where they're going to make their money at the second level. There's one kid I absolutely loved, who I didn't know it. No one knew anything about because he was a late ad, who was a great story. We'll get into him in a second, but yeah, so that's what happens there. You can't touch the quarterback, just like in a real practice. In fact, if you do, the coach is gonna yell at you.
Mm-hmm.
And then it's zone defense in 11-on-11, cover 1 and cover 3. There's man in 7-on-7 for sure, because what Jim Nagy brought up, that's really important to see guys against man coverage. You cannot blitz at all. Very vanilla scheme, 43 scheme. But the cool thing here is guys will be changing. The guys will be changing positions sometimes. We talked about Antoine Randall back in 2002 when he was a college option quarterback in Indiana, and he moved to receiver here. We're seeing DNs playing inside here at D tackle. There's one guy we're going to talk about when we talk about defense who everybody says he looks apart, and he opened some eyes. That's a part of it here, is you get to see the effort, as you talked about earlier, about the practices. Guys have got to bring it. It's their last time for the combine, and this is it. So that's pretty much it. Anything you could think of?
No, I think that's it. It just sometimes it can be difficult when you're talking about linemen, defensive and offensive linemen, because they can't hit the quarterback, and it's always, the quarterback has time because the quarterback knows what defense it is, because like you said, you can only play cover 1 or cover 3, can't blitz. And so I feel like I always get I like the one-on-ones, and I always think the skill position players and quarterbacks, receivers, cornerbacks, you get a good feel for them. Linemen is a little tougher. You can watch the one-on-ones, but they happen so fast, and if there's a big crowd huddled around, it can be tough to see. But that's the one I sort of rely more on talking to people. Well, I talk to people about everybody, but lineman is a little bit of a difficult judge because of the way the rules are set up.
Yeah, in fact,
And linebackers.
No, yeah, exactly, because you can't take them down.
Right.
But I love the one-on-ones with the D line versus the offensive line. That's always great.
Yep.
Those are always great because everybody gets into it. You hear everyone cheering them on, and guys getting each other's faces. It's actually pretty cool. So, yeah, let's roll to it.
Yeah, so let's go with some standouts. You like the New Hampshire running back, Dylan Laub. I know Andrew DeCecco likes him too. So.
Oh man, yeah, we actually talked to him on Sirius XM, so I was able to ask him. It's Laube.
Oh, Laube, okay.
Yeah, I didn't. I said, hey, is it Laub or Laube? I said, I thought he'd for sure say Laube. He goes, no, Laube. I'm like, okay, great. At least we got that right. This is ridiculous. Like, nobody knew anything about him because he was a late ad. For those of you who are real big draft people, I asked him about his career. He was not recruited at all other than New Hampshire. No one offered. He set all sorts of team records. This is an incredible stat. So this year at Central Michigan, he had 12 receptions for 295 yards and 2 touchdowns.
Oh my Lord.
I know. And Brett Whitefield from Fantasy Points Data said that he was lined up almost exclusively in the slot, and they couldn't stop him. So I went up and watched some TV copy, and he does remind me of Rex Burkhead, former NFL running back. Super versatile. I know people go, oh, he's white. Yeah, but that's not really why. It's stylistically, based on what I saw. It's the first thing I noticed. His way to dart in and out. He's a really good kickoff and punt returner. In fact, I talked to a scout. He said he didn't think he'd get drafted had he not been here. But he's looked so good. He said, man, he goes, you know how it works here sometimes. Guys come out of nowhere and move up or get drafted. He goes, the thing is, and Dylan talked about this, because of COVID, he's older. I think he's 23 or 24. one year he just didn't play, and the other one he barely played. He's a redshirt freshman, so he was with New Hampshire for 5 seasons, so he's a little bit older. Doesn't really have an injury history,
Right.
and numbers are really good. I mean, this kid is fascinating. He caught the ball incredibly well, so smooth and quick, great short area quickness, like outstanding. So there you go for your draft nicks, Dylan Lalby from New Hampshire.
Yeah, and running backs is another position because they don't get tackled. Like you can
Exactly.
see him catch the ball out of the backfield, which is nice. Ray Davis, the Kentucky running back who started off at Temple, I believe, is another guy out here. There's a kid named who we liked. Me and Sam Fickle has been out here. He does analytics stuff for InsideTheBirds.com. There was another running back whose name suddenly escapes me, who looked pretty good. He was Isaiah. I think his name was Isaiah. But running backs are tough because you'll watch them break through a hole and no one's really allowed to like
Isaiah Davis, yeah.
Isaiah Davis, yeah.
From South Dakota State. Yep.
Right. Can't really tackle them, so they just burst up the field, and that's it's like watching practice at training camp or OTAs.
You're
But
looking
wide
for
receiver,
juice. Yeah.
yeah,
You're looking for
yeah.
juice.
You look for juice, like a little wiggle, a little burst. Right, right. Wide receivers. I think wide receivers have been fun to watch here. You have some real technicians, starting with Ladd McConkey, who it's funny. Ladd had a good first day,
Yeah.
and you could tell on day 2 that the D-backs were like, all right, we know this guy got like they were ready to get at him because they were getting very physical with him in the one-on-ones on day 2. And the first rep or two, you saw him get diverted, but then he responded. He's like, oh, you guys are getting physical. I'm gonna put that extra move on you, and he's got really great footwork.
One thing on Ray Davis, his real first name is Ramon Davis. So if you follow Temple, that's how come I remembered him. I'm like, oh, because I don't remember him as Ray Davis. When Harry Donahue, whoever was doing the radio for Temple, he would say Ramon Davis, and then I don't remember them calling him Ray then, but he definitely goes because he's now with the third school. He was with Vanderbilt earlier, and then he's now with Kentucky. But in getting back to receivers, Ladd McConkey out of Georgia, his ability, his route running to go one way and go another, his change of direction is COD. It was a scouting term. It's ridiculous without the football. Just when he gets into his initial part of his route, it's just absurd. Just blown away by this guy. Holy smokes. And you want to talk about breaking ankles. For those of you who watch the practice tape from whether it's NFL Network or ESPN, I don't know I know the game's on NFL Network tomorrow, but McConkey was good. Roman Wilson had a really good week, like so far.
Very good.
Michigan. My favorite guy coming in, because the receivers coach told me about him, is Ricky Pearsall, who's going to go probably 3rd round. A little bit like Cooper Kupp in terms of route running, terrific. He's a little bit shorter than Cooper Kupp, maybe by an inch. Thought he was really interesting, good player. Ben Sinnott was by far the best tight end here out of Kansas State. He caught everything.
Not everything. There was that one that he punched up into the air.
Yeah, we both saw that, right. But it wasn't an easy catch, but he should have had it.
No, it wasn't. Yeah.
In and out of his breaks, explosive. Then Jared Wiley, who's a wide tight end, who's enormous. He's 6'7", but he's not real wide. He's long. He ran well with the ball in his hands. I like him. And then I know this kid's going to be a 1st-round pick, but just to see him up close, Fuaga, the tackle, enormous tackle.
Oh, he moves so well.
For his size, I know. 332 and just under 6'6". Yeah, so those would be some of the standouts that we saw.
Yeah, one other guy I wanted to add that I was particularly impressed with. And by the way, if you go to InsideTheBirds.com, Sam Finkel was doing some standout guys from practice as he observes. And Sam, for most people know, he does analytics work for us, but he was also a coach. He was a analytics coach / recruiter at Penn State for a couple of years. So he knows what he's looking at. So you can find his work on InsideTheBirds.com. But the receiver from South Carolina, Xavier Leggett, he has really nice size, and sometimes those guys with size, they lack twitch, but I thought he just moves pretty smoothly. So he's a guy that stood out to me, sort of knows how to use his body to make catches. So yeah, Xavier Leggett, wide receiver from South Carolina. And then there was a corner from Kentucky named Andrew Phillips, who I thought played with some physicality. You always want to see that in the one-on-ones here, because let's face it, we know that the corners and the safeties have a disadvantage because the quarterback is not under duress, and you can hold on to the ball for 30 seconds until your receiver gets open. So it's good when the corners can get up there, they can play press man, get a little physical. And this kid, Andrew Phillips, had a pretty good day of practice. And Max Melton from Rutgers,
Oh,
by the
he's
way.
good.
South Jersey kid.
Oh, yeah, he's really good. Yeah,
Oh
he's one of
man,
the
not
best
only
here.
is he good and physical and fast, Adam, but wait till I mean, if the Eagles ever drafted this kid, the personality is through the roof. His brother Bo is playing for the Packers right now, but Max Melton is. And listen, we know the Eagles are going to be looking at corners. They should be. That's a guy who can run. So I'd be intrigued by the Max Melton name if he were there for the Eagles in maybe
Yeah.
round 2 or 3.
Yeah, he's good. Well, yeah, that's what it's funny you say it because that's exactly what I was told. Rounds 2 to 3 for him.
Mm-hmm.
He had best GPS time of any defensive back on day one.
Yep.
Yeah, he's twitchy. He can move. His dad Gary played in the NFL. So yeah, it's a pretty good story out of Rutgers. And yeah, your guy from Kentucky. It's Andrew Andru.
Mm-hmm.
He's oh, by the way, we should mention this. So these are the official weights and heights at the Senior Bowl, and then they get the real ones count at the combine. That's the one that the NFL recognizes. But so your guy Andrew Phillips is 5'10" and 4/10 of an inch, 191. So and then let me see. There was one other guy that I was going to talk. Because
Well, we got to talk about Quinyon Mitchell as well, the
we're going to
corner
get to him in
from
a second.
Toledo.
One more. Tyke Smith, who's from Philly, from West Philly. I had a nice talk with Tyke. He went to West Virginia, then transferred to Georgia, who is a safety, by the way, 5'9" and 6/10 of an inch, but 206. 206, so Philly's own Tyke Smith. Looking forward to seeing him as we get out of here. And then I've got a couple defenders.
Hold on to that thought 1 second, all right? Because I
Good.
want to transition to defense. First,
Sure.
that we want to hear a quick word from our friends at Sky Motor Cars.
Sky Motor Cars in Westchester is a different sort of dealership. All it takes is one look at their Highline pre-owned vehicles that people all over the country want and need. Owner Brett Schiller, make sure you don't spend a dime of your money before you purchase the car. Sky Motor Cars allows you to make all the decisions regarding your next vehicle. At Sky Motor Cars, you never have to spend more than necessary. Visit SkyMotorCars.com today or call 610-918-7225.
And if you stop into Sky Motor Cars out there in Westchester, PA, make sure you tell them Adam and Geoff sent you. You will get a great deal. All right, we have to talk about some of these defensive players, especially because to me, the highlight of these practices was watching Roman Wilson, who we mentioned, the wide receiver from Michigan, who's just so smooth in his route running, going up against maybe the top cornerback prospect here, which is Quinyon Mitchell from Toledo. That was
Mitchell,
a highlight, watching them going at it.
Mitchell at worst is top 20, at best top 10.
Mm-hmm.
Like so as we talked to some people in scouting, he was not highly recruited. That's why he went to Toledo. For whatever reason, I don't know. That I didn't get any feedback on what teams didn't like it from his high school tape. Or his colleges didn't like from his high school tape, but he's so smooth and long. He's really, really good. By the way, Max Melton's measurable is 5'11 exactly, 193. Arm is good arm. Wow, good arm length.
Yeah, he's compactly built. I actually talked to him for a good 5 to 10 minutes, and you can tell he's got a really good, strong physical build. He's compact.
Yep. So it's good to see him. And Quinyon Mitchell is just, and as we said earlier, he played at Toledo, and that's where Sirianni's good friend Jason Cannell coaches, the Toledo head coach. They play together at Mount Union, so he'll have great intel there if they like him. Although I don't think he's going to get there based on this is the early word, not a. This is from college scouting people, not a very good corner class. Maybe a little top heavy.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't see this kid making it to them.
No, and it's, we'll see what happens. You never know, but it feels like it would be, for what you just said, a really good marriage. The Eagles clearly need to get younger at cornerback. They need a kid like this who has good size. You said, like, he's 6 foot, right? 6'1", 6 foot?
Mitchell?
Yeah.
Yeah.
He's definitely, I talked to him for 5 minutes. He's taller than me, and I'm 5'11".
Oh, yeah. He's okay. So he is 6 feet. Quinyon.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Quinyon Mitchell out of Toledo is 6 foot 3/10 of an inch, 195. Arm is 31 and 18ths of an inch.
That's good.
Yeah. And Max Melton, by the way, is 32, which is really good for
really
a corner.
good. Yeah.
It's rare to have guys 32 or more. In fact, you want your offense. Think about it this way. You really want your tackle to be 34 inches.
Right.
So 32 is pretty good.
Yeah. So I talked with Quinyon, and you can tell he plays the part. He was very excited about his matchups against Roman Wilson. He even said, he got me once. I can't wait to get him tomorrow. So he's
nice.
Competitive. And I asked him why in this era of NIL, And Portal, would he stay at Toledo when by the time he was a junior, he was starting to, really ascend? And he said loyalty and respect. He said, I was comfortable in Toledo. My coaches, I owed it to them to stay. I wanted to see it out. That was more important to me, he said, than just going on to the next great program. So, I don't think people will look at that negatively, like, oh, you didn't want to compete with the best because he came down here at the Senior Bowl and did it. I think that people will view that positively. Like, you have loyalty to the people who recruited you where you originally went. You wanted to help the program, and I think that that's a really cool thing. So, and it would make a lot of sense, like you said. The coach at Toledo was a teammate of Nick Sirianni, so it's great intel that you can get that other teams might not be able to get. But as you mentioned, they're where the Eagles pick and where this guy might go just might not work out, but we'll have to see.
Yeah, a couple guys I'll give you from people I spoke with, and if you're watching if you're watching the TV, even off TV, you can see this Brandon Fiske from or Fisk, D tackle from Florida State. He's got, I'm told, some positional versatility, but he's going to line mostly up inside. Violent hands, good off the snap. Had a very good week. Darius Robinson, who's a DN D tackle out of Missouri, he's got everything you want. Had a very good week. For what I'm told, it's just consistency with him. He's actually bigger. He's actually longer than one scout said. He's a little bit longer than they anticipated. They were love that. He's 6'5", even 286. Arms are this is why they're salivating over this guy. 34 and 6'8", 6/10 of an inch. So just under
Guy
30.
can scratch his ankles without bending over. Is that what
Yeah,
you're
I
telling
know.
me?
Hands are big. Some big hands, almost 10 and a half. Wingspan, almost 85. I mean, he's one of the longest guys here. So so what we're told is he's out of Missouri. It's just the consistency, because he sometimes relies on his measurables and athletic ability rather than play consistently. But as one of the scouting people told me, it's all about where he gets drafted and have a good coach and get the most out of him, because you can't teach what he's got. It's just, okay, is he going to apply himself? We'll see.
Right, right. The quarterback play, Adam, I thought for the first 2 days was sort of underwhelming.
Quarter or corner?
Quarter throwers,
Quarterback.
passers of the football.
Yeah,
Yeah,
got
it just, compared to what we've seen in past Senior Bowls where guys have really established themselves. There was one practice we were watching, the afternoon practice, and
Bad.
I made a point. I said, man, this is one of the most underwhelming practices I've seen in a while. And three people sitting in front of me who I believe were in personnel who I don't know, they just looked at me and shook their head and they made that face like, dude, you're telling us. Like, it was just check down after check down and some inaccurate passes. And, just nobody really, to me, stepped up and said, oh, I'm a quarterback that people aren't thinking. I know you do like the Tulane quarterback, so we can talk about him. But in general,
Right.
overall, I just didn't think the quarterback play stood out.
No, I talked about Milton earlier. Joe Milton had all sorts of accurate issues. Spencer Rattler looked like a day 3 guy to me. I know his tape isn't bad.
Mhm.
Michael Pratt, I thought, was the best quarterback here. Michael Penix looks smooth. He's got a good arm. There are issues about what happens when he's under pressure, but he looked good. Sam Hartman, I've called a giant Gardner Minshew, although basically Hartman's only like a half an inch taller. They very stylistic, the same. Can't drive the football. He could be a backup in the NFL. I was giving rounds 5 to 7 for him. Bo Nix had a good week, but he definitely, from what I'm told, looked good. Top 40 pick potentially goes somewhere in the first round, because look, quarterbacks get pushed up, folks. That's just the way it is. And I want to bring this guy up because he's Gus Bradley's son. Carter Bradley didn't do anything of note on day 1. He's here because he's from South Alabama. They always put South Alabama players in here. That's where the game and practices are. He had a good day too. I was like, oh wow, he could actually drive the football a little bit. So good for him. He's got good size at 6'3" and about 218. So that would be it for quarterback and everything else.
All right. I don't want to slight my guy Theo Johnson, by the way, my Penn State tight end.
Yep.
He's a good player. He came in I think Sinet, as you mentioned, came in as the sort of the top ranked tight end here, but some people I spoke to said that Theo's not too far behind. So that's another guy for locals who are Penn State fans may want to pay attention to. He's a pretty good prospect there. Anybody else we want to get through?
No, that's it.
I think that's it.
My favorites were Sinet, Pearsall, on offense. Lobby, great. Ray Davis has got some juice in the pass game out of Kentucky. We mentioned earlier, Vermont Davis. That's it. I mean, we're really early in the process here, but then we'll follow up at the combine, and we'll have more from our scouting sources after they finish watching the practice tape for the week. But just be careful of overrating these guys, because as you were saying earlier, you can't tackle, you can't hit. Receivers should do well here. And by the way, the receiver class last year from the Senior Bowl, there were like 10 guys who played significant minutes. Jaden Reed, Puka Nacua, who was actually hurt here, and he was incredible. Obviously, he's a rookie. Dontavian Wicks. I mean, you could go through the list. I mean, last year's was one of the best probably of all time in the Senior Bowl for receivers.
No doubt about it. All right, we'll be back with everybody on Monday morning, and we will start to turn the page to this offseason coming up for the Philadelphia Eagles. That's going to do it for this episode of Inside the Birds, the leading podcast in the Eagles Intel. As always, we thank you for flying with us down here in Mobile, Inside the Birds. Be sure to check out our friends at PHLSportsNation.com. They're enhancing the fans' experience with their coverage of all Philadelphia sports teams. For the fan, by the fan is their motto. So make sure you check them out at PHLSportsNation.com and on Twitter at PHLSportsNation.